Tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court deciding to weigh in on a critical issue that could make or break the special counsel's case against former President Trump, agreeing to decide whether Mr. Trump must be shielded from prosecution by claiming presidential immunity for the acts he took leading up to January 6. Those acts the basis for the criminal election interference case he's now facing in federal court. The move further delaying any trial in the case, likely for months. And if Mr. Trump wins, the charges would be dismissed. Arguments now set for the week of April 22nd. An appeals court had ruled against him, saying former President Trump has become Citizen Trump with all of the defenses of any other criminal defendant. But Mr. Trump hoped the Supreme Court would put that on pause, saying he was being wrongly prosecuted for official acts that happened while he was still in office.
If you have a president that doesn't have immunity, he's never going to be free to do anything because the opposing party will always indict him as soon as he leaves the White House.
The High Court already set to decide another legal battle for the Republican frontrunner, hearing arguments last month over Colorado's move to ban him from the ballot. The justices sounding skeptical of Colorado's ability to disqualify him there, with a ruling expected any time.
And Laura, on another front, there's been a development in Mr. Trump's New York civil fraud case.
Yes, Lester, an appeals court judge rejected his effort to delay paying that more than $450 million judgment. Mr. Trump's attorney saying today he may need to sell properties to cover that penalty, a remarkable acknowledgement that he may not have the cash on hand. As a result of today's ruling, he now has a chance to obtain a loan, to post a bond. But if he can't get a bond and soon and pay the full judgment himself, the Attorney General could move to seize control of his New York properties. Meanwhile, a source with direct knowledge tells NBC News that the judge overseeing that trial received a letter at his chambers today with white powder. Preliminary tests indicate that the powder is harmless, but this isn't the first threat against him, Lester.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.